There is a moment in the wilderness when the temptation becomes breathtakingly bold. Satan takes Jesus to a very high mountain, and in a single sweeping view, he shows him something extraordinary. All the kingdoms of the world and their glory. Then comes the offer. All this I will give you if you will fall down and worship me. Think about what is happening here. The enemy is offering Jesus the world, power, authority, influence, dominion. But there is a condition, one act of worship, just one. No cross, no suffering, no rejection. A kingdom without the cost. And if we're honest, this temptation is not limited to the wilderness. It is still whispered today. You can have influence without integrity. You can have success without obedience. You can have the kingdom without the cross. But Jesus refuses. Why? Because some victories cost too much. I'm Brent, and this is episode 80 of the Bible Unplugged. We are in part 4 of our Love in the Wilderness series. The movement through these temptations has been deliberate. First, the temptation of appetite turns stones into bread. Second, the temptation of identity. If you are the Son of God, throw yourself down. But now the stakes rise dramatically. This temptation is about authority. Who rules the world? And, more importantly, how will that rule be established? Matthew tells us that Satan takes Jesus to a very high mountain. That phrase is not random. In the Bible, mountains are places where heaven and earth intersect. Moses met God on Mount Sinai. Elijah encountered God on Mount Horeb. Later in the Gospels, Jesus will be transfigured before his disciples on a mountain. Mountains are places of revelation, places where kingdoms are announced. And here in the wilderness, the enemy stages a counterfeit revelation. He shows Jesus all the kingdoms of the world and their glory. We are not told exactly how this vision unfolds, but the language suggests something panoramic. Empires, cities, armies, palaces, everything humanity calls power. Then Satan makes the offer. All these things I will give you. Now pause for a moment. That statement raises a question. Could Satan actually give these kingdoms? Surprisingly, the Bible suggests that, at least for now, he has a measure of influence over them. In the Gospel of John chapter 12, Jesus calls him the ruler of this world. Paul describes him in the book of Ephesians as the prince of the power of the air. And in the Gospel of Luke's version of this temptation, Satan says something very revealing. To me it has been delivered, and I give it to whom I will. In other words, the enemy claims authority over the structures of worldly power. But notice something even more striking. The offer is temporary authority to the one who already owns eternal authority. The book of Psalms chapter 24 says, "The earth is the Lord's and everything in it." The book of Daniel chapter 7 describes the Son of Man receiving dominion over all nations. And the book of Psalms chapter 2 records God declaring, "Ask of me, and I will give the nations as your inheritance." The kingdoms of the world were already destined to belong to the Son, but the enemy offers them now, immediately, without the waiting, without the suffering, without the cross. The temptation is not about whether Jesus will rule. The Bible is clear that he will. The real question is how. Will he rule by obedience or by compromise? Will he receive the kingdom from the Father or seize it from the enemy. The offer is a shortcut, a kingdom without sacrifice, glory without suffering. But Jesus knows something the tempter ignores. A kingdom gained by worshiping evil would become a kingdom ruled by evil. And so, Jesus responds with words that echo one of the most important passages in the Old Testament. Jesus answers by quoting the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 6, verse 13. You shall worship the Lord your God, and him only shall you serve. This verse is part of the larger passage surrounding the Shema, which is the central confession in Judaism. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. It declared that only one authority deserves worship. And that declaration came from Israel's wilderness story. After leaving Egypt, Israel repeatedly faced the temptation to worship other gods. At Mount Sinai, they built a golden calf. Later, they worshiped Baal and other idols. The temptation of Israel was always the same: trade faithfulness for power, trade obedience for prosperity. But where Israel failed in the wilderness, Jesus succeeds. The Son refuses the bargain. And Matthew records the sharpest words Jesus speaks in any of the temptations. Away with you, Satan. The test is over. The kingdom will come, but it will come the Father's way. This final temptation in the wilderness exposes something deeper than a struggle for power. It reveals a pattern that runs throughout the entire human story. The temptation is not simply about ruling the world. It's about how we obtain what we desire. Because Satan's offer contains a subtle truth. The kingdoms of the world really will belong to Jesus. The prophets had already said so. Daniel saw a vision of the Son of Man receiving dominion over all nations. The book of Psalm chapter 2 declares that the Messiah will inherit the nations. So, the enemy is not offering something completely false. He is offering something premature, something misdirected, something gained through compromise instead of obedience. In other words, the temptation is a shortcut. If you step back and look at the three temptations together, a pattern begins to appear. The enemy attacks three fundamental areas of life. First, provision. Turn these stones into bread. Second, identity. If you are the Son of God, throw yourself down. And third, authority. All these kingdoms I will give you. Bread, identity, power. Or, to put it in another way, survival, validation, control. These are the same pressures that shape human anxiety today. We worry about having enough. We struggle with who we are. And we often believe that if we just had enough influence or control, everything would finally feel secure. But Jesus refuses to ground his life in any of those things. Not bread, not spectacle, not power. Instead, he anchors his life in something deeper: trust in the Father. There is another important detail in this temptation. Satan asks for something very specific: fall down and worship me. In the ancient world, worship and authority were inseparable. Who you worship determines who rules. This is why the first commandment says, "You shall have no other gods before me." Because worship is not merely a religious act. It's a declaration of ultimate loyalty. Satan is not simply offering Jesus political power. He is asking Jesus to change his allegiance, to acknowledge another authority besides the Father. But Jesus refuses. because the kingdom of God cannot be built by bowing down to anything less than God. And just like the previous temptation, this one returns later, at the cross. When Jesus hangs there in agony, the crowds mock him. Save yourself. Come down from the cross. He trusts in God. Let God deliver him now. The same temptation appears. Avoid suffering. Seize power. Prove yourself. But Jesus refuses. In the wilderness, he refused the kingdom without suffering. At the cross, he refuses escape from suffering. Because the path to redemption was never going to be a shortcut. The kingdom would come through sacrifice. And here is where the story becomes remarkable. In the wilderness, Satan said, "All these I will give you." But after the resurrection, Jesus stands before his disciples and says something extraordinary. "All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me." The authority Satan pretended to offer, the Father truly gives. Not through compromise, through obedience. Not through worshiping evil, through surrender to God. Not by grasping power, but laying down his life. We're going to pause for a moment for a brief time of prayer to allow the Spirit to make this message personal. It is a prayer you can carry with you throughout your day. As before, I will say a simple 2-phrase prayer designed to follow your breathing. Let the rhythm of the prayer settle your mind and allow the meaning of this story to become personal. Let's begin. I worship you alone. My life belongs to you. I worship you alone. My life belongs to you. I worship you alone. My life belongs to you. I worship you alone. My life belongs to you. This temptation reveals something important about the way faith works in everyday life. Many of our struggles come from the desire to control outcomes. We want security. We want recognition. We want influence. But Jesus shows us that the deepest strength in life does not come from control. It comes from trust. Trusting that God's timing is better than shortcuts. Trust that obedience leads to something greater than compromise. Trust that God's purposes unfold in ways we may not immediately understand. So, this week, pay attention to moments where the pressure to compromise appears. It might come in a small way. The temptation to bend the truth. The temptation to gain approval by abandoning conviction. When those moments arise, pause and remember the quiet strength Jesus demonstrated in the wilderness. The kingdom of God is not built through shortcuts. It grows through faithfulness. The enemy offered Jesus the kingdoms of the world, but only if he bowed. Jesus refused. And because he refused, the Father gave him what the enemy could only pretend to offer. The kingdoms of the world become his, not by compromise, but by the cross. And as you know, the music in the background means my time is up. I hope this has been helpful. If so, share this episode with someone who might need encouragement in their own wilderness season. And if you would like a steady voice of reflection in between our weekly episodes, my daily podcast, Still Here, offers short moments of prayer and an insight to help you face the responsibilities of your day. You can find it wherever you listen to podcasts or at powerloveandmiracles.com. My prayer for you is that you will face the pressures of this week with quiet strength that comes from trusting God more than shortcuts. Stand firm in the truth that the kingdom of God grows through faithfulness, not compromise. Let your worship belong to God alone. And when the world offers influence, security, or success at the cost of your own soul, remember the one who refused to bow. And because he stood firm, the kingdom will never be taken away. Have a blessed week. Just to let you know, all opinions are my own. If you agree, keep listening. If you don't, keep listening. You might learn to like it. All Bible quotations come from the World English Bible, which is a public domain work. Our show theme song is Awesome Call by Kevin MacLeod and used under Creative Commons license. The content of this podcast is copyrighted 2026 by J. Brent Eaton, and this has been a Power, Love, and Miracles production.